not really quite sure how to phrase it, but just kind of going off of my recent experience. My sister just passed away, Jackie, just as a base foundation for my question. Before that, I was a bit fascinated by death, but now I'm very fascinated by it, and I'm just wondering, because I feel like its presence is now more known to me than it was before. I feel like now everywhere I look, I see the temporality of things, that everything is going to die. And it just has sort of thrown this question around for me of like, what really matters in the face of the fact that everything is going to die, that material things in the material world doesn't hold this sort of comfort, happiness, cure that we're looking for. What really matters? Like, how can we live? That's a question.
In some ways, you're very lucky. You know, there is something about us as human beings. It doesn't matter how intense of an experience you may have and how profound of maybe a set of insights that may be given to you through an experience. Even I think if you were to look at how you are today and compare it to how you were, say, a week ago, you know, some of the intensity, it has diminished, you know. You know, the experience of death, especially if it's someone very close to you, it doesn't really leave much room for thinking. It doesn't leave much room for talking, but it does create a good amount of tears. There is grief, and that's the only language available, you know, and it kind of pushes you inward. There is nothing to say. And I think the experience just kind of pulls you in and consumes you. And initially what happens is there is a relationship between you and the person who has passed. And there is a good amount of reflection and thoughts that take place. Memories come into play depending on the relationship. You either have a lot of good memories or a lot of perhaps sad memories filled perhaps with regret and remorse. You know, sometimes my father calls and I just don't have the energy to kind of pick up the phone and talk with him. I say to myself, maybe it's going to be a 5-minute conversation. He just calls to say hello. And my father is not the sort of a fellow who calls all the time, just once in a while. And I say, if I pick up the phone, it's probably going to be a conversation about politics. It will probably take about 20, 30 minutes. And it's not something I want to do. So I just let the phone ring, and my voicemail is full, so you can't leave a message. then I say to myself, he is 90. There's a good chance he may close his eyes tonight and not wake up. And then I'm going to be left with the question, why didn't I pick up the phone? Do I want to live with that? And as soon as I begin to think like that, something overtakes and overcomes me. I pick up the phone and I call him. And at that point, I no longer really care if the conversation is 5 minutes or 25 minutes. So initially, with the passing of someone, it's you and the person. So still, the sort of grief that you have is external. It's towards someone that you have lost. Depending on the temperament that you came with when you were born, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you're a feeler or a thinker, that experience stays with you longer, either through the feeling center or the thinking center. And something really strange begins to happen, which is the grief is so intense because of the intimacy that you had with your sister that it kind of leaks itself everywhere. It's not just limited to Jennifer anymore. It's not that you have lost Jennifer. It's as if when you look out there, everything is slowly withering away and you don't really know why. It becomes meaningless. And it's no longer about Jennifer. It's like everything you see out there could potentially be a Jennifer, whether it's a tree or a relationship or a car or teaching a class or two. It's like now everything is being touched by death. And the language for that, for the most part, beginning with the passing of your sister, and after it becomes a bit more personal, which is you, your history, your past, and all the people in your life and all the things you have to do on a daily basis, your only language really is just silent. There isn't much you can say. But you're not wired to live with these feelings for too long. It's too much for our organism. So the feelings kind of slowly diminish and they are replaced by thinking. Now you begin to think about things. But the foundation of your thoughts are kind of built on the feelings. Okay. You can do a couple of things. You can, it's kind of like when the fire is about to die, you add more wood to it. Or you just say, I've been around this fire for long enough. I really just want to go to sleep. It's time to rest. And you wake up in the morning and you look at that, the fireplace and everything has been turned to ash. And you bring the vacuum and you clean everything out. Depending on how this particular experience makes you feel, whether you're feeling or thinking about it, you will either add more wood to the fire to keep it going, or you'll get to a place where you say, and it happens organically, like anything else in life. It really is very much like a relationship. First you say, I can't live without him. Then you say, I can live without him, but only for 5 hours. Then you say, I can live without him, but just 30 minutes. Then you say, I can live without him for maybe 2, 3 days. And then you say, I just think I can live without him, period. So what happens is, despite the fact that the grief is like this ocean of sorrow, and you swim in it, you feel it, you think about it, all these insights come to you, and they're really quite rich. Despite the sadness they create, there is something nice about them. You feel connected to something. It's undefinable, it's not tangible, but it makes you feel connected to something very grand. It may be hollow, it may be void, it may be nothingness, but despite all the awful things that it creates, there is a sense of connectedness to something. So, if you look at how you were 2 weeks ago versus how you are today, the intensity has diminished. If I was to kind of see you a month from now, maybe you and I can sit and talk about the experience. It really is mostly like gossip, but it's a sort of gossip that brings certain components inside you alive. It makes you think and reflect and feel. You may even shed some tears, and you may even say regretfully that as time has passed, you begin to think about this stuff less because life has gotten too busy now. You're teaching classes, you've been at this committee and that committee, you had to deal with this student and that student, because the only way we can really survive these moments in life is our organism eventually takes over and we kind of get consumed by forgetfulness, and it's necessary at times. It's a really, really difficult thing to be like a Socrates or to be like a Jesus Christ or a Malcolm X, where your skin, inwardly speaking, it becomes so thick that you're able to kind of live with this sort of pain about 20 hours a day. Those are just professional human beings who can do such things. For us, it's, I think, a bit too much. So your body just shuts down, your mind shuts down. What happens, depending on, where you are in life, what stage you are intellectually, emotionally, there is something about you that comes out and says, this is the Allison before the passing of her sister. This is Allison experiencing while Jennifer was slowly getting sicker and then eventually passed away. And this is the Allison who suffered awful, sadness for about 2 weeks. Now, this is the Allison who's beginning to think about this stuff now. It's not as intense, but I'm thinking, And then, if you look at from this stage to this stage, it becomes less and less and less intense. If you give it again some more time, you won't think about it often. What you can do, depending on which of these Allisons you like, you can find the right wood or fluid and keep putting this wood into this fire. It could be the fire of forgetfulness, where you just no longer want to think about Jennifer, where you no longer want to think about the meaninglessness of life, perhaps, There comes a point where you just refuse to forget, and you will try your best to find various instruments to keep the flame going. It's funny, before coming to this room, you and I were talking about, all of us were really outside, just talking about this new dean coming onto campus and saying that I'm not going to add any classes. In fact, I'm going to cut classes and no one can teach more than 6 or 7 classes, all that stuff. All these activities that you and I do on a daily basis have a tendency of pushing perhaps the most meaningful parts of life, parts of who and what we are. They just push them away. Consider if you were to, for example, truly believe and feel that almost everything in life is meaningless. You've driven about 3 hours to come here. What exactly does it get you? You come here, we sit, we talk. There are moments of intimacy, connection. Eventually you have to go to sleep. And in the morning you have to go back home. And all that stays with you are memories. And they'll eventually be forgotten. They'll fade and eventually forgotten. It's temporary. So the only thing that really stays is the fact that all things just go away. So why do anything? There is this line in Rumi that عشق در دریای غم غمناک نیست. That if you truly believe that all of life is an exercise in futility and nothing is worth doing, there is nothing out there that's worth doing. You will most likely do a couple of things. You will either engage in life like the Christian desert fathers, where they simply lock themselves up in a room, find people who are very much like them, and they realize, those people did, that any kind of attachments, physical, emotional, intellectual, it's kind of like worshipping an idol. And so they will do whatever they possibly can to remain intellectually monogamous, which means that anything foreign, alien that enters them, they have to kind of just get rid of. Or you kind of just do things carelessly. The dean, says A, B, C, D. And you have truly understood that it doesn't really matter who the dean is. At the end of the day, he's got to go home. He's got to use the restroom. He's as human and as ridiculous as you and I. So you let him have it. You say a few things, not disrespectfully, but, intelligently. I remember when I was washing this corpse a long time ago. It's a very intimate experience where you, with towels and sponges, you're just kind of washing the corpse. And you ask, why is this person not getting up? Why is he not walking? Why is he not talking? How does life come? does it go? What the hell is all of this? And then I remember going to the car wash, washing cars, and for the next 2 weeks at the dinner table, when all of us were sitting, my parents and my brother and sister, I wouldn't say a word. There was nothing to say. The experience was kind of just living through me, and it trashed all of my ideas about things. And then, without any warning or notice, without any knowledge on my part, all of a sudden I began to kind of just eat well and laugh. And then I remember I had a couple of accidents on the Bay Bridge where both cars were totaled. And the first time it happened, I came out screaming and saying a lot of profanities. And then, while it was about midnight, so it wasn't very much traffic, it was 1979. I was very young, and I said, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to study what I want to study. I'm going to do in life what I want to do, because my life can be taken at any time. In the morning, when I woke up, we woke up in San Jose at a friend's house. I went to the tennis courts and played tennis for 5 hours. Everything was fine. When I got a bit older, I had another accident on the Bay Bridge. At that particular stage in my life, I was a bit more mature. I had been teaching. I had done some reading about various things. And it stayed with me for a bit longer. And then it kind of just was an experience that once in a while would be retrieved, talked about amongst friends and family, and then it would go away. There is this idea that, and it's an idea mostly that comes from the East and Far East, that if you really want to devote your life to reflection, to understanding, you cannot do it alone. It's really impossible. It doesn't matter how intense or grand of an experience you've had, you will forget. But if you want to make sure that it is not forgotten, you need someone to poke you with it all the time. It's a great feeling, it really is, to look at the rest of the world as idiots, and everybody's doing something and pursuing something. Here you are, and you have lost someone very close to you, and you say, where are all these people going? What are they doing? How is it no one can stop and think and examine? It kind of puts you at such an elevated place, and you're not really making a judgment, but you're making an observation. Don't people know that they're eventually going to die? Okay, so you make $20,000 more, so what? But eventually you will come down. Iran has had one revolution and a few civil wars. You get out of your house and there are tens of thousands of people marching in the street. And it's such an intoxicating experience. And you go there every day shouting for justice and equality. You're even willing to give your life. I remember like soldiers jumping out of a truck. And I would say, I don't mind dying. I'm dying for justice, It's a very inspired experience. But it won't take very long before you become your old stupid self. I don't mean to disrespect or insult you or your experience in any way. But what you have is an inspired moment in life that has caused you to think intensely about things. The problem with inspiration is very much like putting lighter fluid in charcoal. It goes up in flames, and it's gorgeous. The only problem is it doesn't last very long. If you're really, really talented, you can will yourself to remember this all the time. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do, because you have to allow your organism to become intimate with pain, discomfort. But, one of the 7 deadly sins is sloth. It's part of who and what we are. It's very difficult to overcome comfort. So all this talk about, will yourself to do this and will yourself to do that. We have far too many blind spots to be able to overcome ourselves.